say hello to Linda McLoughlin, MCC. Thank you so much for joining me today, Linda, for our first conversation for International Coaching Week into the group. And Linda, you're going to be talking with us about cross-cultural coaching. Linda, I know that you've got extensive experience working in different parts of the world with an emphasis on leadership and government reform. And you're also on the board of directors for the ICF and an MCC coach. I would love you to kind of share a bit about this, your background that will help position what exactly we mean by cross-cultural coaching.
Great. Well, hello, Mariana, and thank you for this invitation. Great to be talking to you. And I think this is our 22nd International Coaching Week, and it's bigger than ever this year. I think I heard there's over 900 events in 25 different languages going on this week. Yeah, great buzz around coaching. All good. Yeah, cross-cultural and multicultural, they're very close words, but they have a slight difference. And I think when we're talking about cross-cultural, there's 4 dimensions to it. First is that we need to consider our own worldview. You know, who am I? What ethnicity am I? What gender am I? What sexual orientation am I? How am I seeing the world? And then the second piece is around being positive towards other cultures and ethnicities. So being open and, you know, as we are as coaches. I think the third step is getting knowledge about other cultures. So being proactive, being curious again around what do you believe in? How do you live your life? What's important to you? And then the final piece is getting the skills to be able to work with people from other cultures. So I might work in a multicultural environment, for instance, a multicultural company, multinational. That doesn't mean that I actually have to have close contact with people who are different. But when I'm working cross-culturally, I'm communicating, managing, collaborating with people of various nationalities. So it's a much more action-oriented kind of word.
Before we started talking, Linda, you used a distinction. Well, there was a couple of distinctions that we talked about. The difference between cross-cultural and multicultural, and the cross-cultural piece being about the action, those actions you've just described that we need to take. And you also used something that I hadn't come across before, which was the in-group and out-group communications.
Yeah.
Could you unpack that a bit?
Certainly, yeah. This is something that is kind of ingrained in us from birth. And it has to do with empathy, which is a huge human trait. And you know that empathy is hardwired in the human brain. So what that does is that it allows us recognize people who are similar to us and care for those people. I mean, essentially, it's there to make sure parents don't throw their kids out the window in the middle of the night when they're being difficult. So we're hardwired to recognize similar people who need us and care and need our care. And this was fine probably when we didn't get to travel and migrate and connect with people on Zoom. But essentially, people who are not similar to us are called our outgroup. So we have less natural empathy for those groups. And this is not a flaw. It's not a character flaw. It's something that's very, very human and is hardwired. So, I mean, the thing is learning to be mindful and recognizing that we now are in cross-cultural environments. It's recognizing to take the breath and allowing the empathy that naturally flows when you meet other people who are similar to you, to let it flow, let it be activated in the face of the other. And I think in that way, it's like a muscle. And I have to say, I grew up in Ireland, Mariana, born in the 50s. It was very insular then. And I lived in Ireland more or less full time till 2012, when lo and behold, I got an opportunity to move to the Middle East. So this was, I'm here in Dubai actually currently. And in Dubai, we have about 200 different ethnicities living side by side. And my first job at an American university, we had 80 different faculty and students from 80 different countries around the world. So to say that my in-out-group thing has been reprogrammed at this stage is an understatement, because, and it's a wonderful way to be immersed in such a spectrum, a smorgasbord of cultures, that it really amps up your awareness and especially your biases, assumptions, beliefs. And it's interesting, when I live here, I'm more aware of being Irish than when I'm at home, if that makes sense, you know. But I think life experience, and I do think now people don't have to move abroad. You know, we're all online expats now. I'm looking at my coaching market. I'd say if you are too, Mariana, people listening in will be thinking about it. The world is our market now. Yeah. And this is going to expose us so much more to this variety in ethnicity, nationality, culture. And I think cultural competence is going to be much, much more required.
Absolutely. I think when you were talking about cultural competence, you had a kind of a natural framework that you were talking about. And I think that within the new ICF competencies, the new framework that we've been given from the ICF, there's a real recognition of the importance of this, about awareness of our clients' context and culture. I mean, how does that actually pan out? What do we need to do?
Yeah, I love this new competency, coaching mindset number 2. I think it was always there implicitly, if you like. Yeah. I love that it's made explicit now. And the way I see it is that as coaches, we are the tool, you know, and as the tool, we have to be sure that, you know, we are programmed as best we can to respond to our clients' needs. And part of that is really recognizing, first of all, as I said, who we are and what has shaped us in terms of how we see the world. And then having that curiosity. I think it's an awful lot about curiosity, being interested in the other, wondering about them, and having that openness, you know, to their choices and the decisions they want to make. That's crucial. Not having a kind of right, wrong answer, you know, in your head, or, you know, often clients coming looking for direction. They're at a crossroads. Again, understanding that crossroads can look very different depending on your context, you know, and we might have to, you know, ignore any signposts that are there and allow the client put up the signposts that are meaningful for them at that crossroads. I mean, I had years ago a very interesting situation. I was doing career coaching when I first came out here. I worked at a university, and one of my A students, she lived in Dubai, but she was from Pakistani family, and she was an accounting major. All she wanted was to get into the Big Four graduate program, and she came to share the news she'd been successful. And the next morning, she came back into my office and tears in her eyes. And she said, "You're not going to believe this, but my family won't let me take the job." Now, this was one of the biggest lessons I had around context and having to slow myself down, because I'm a mother of 3 grown-up children, and I kind of knew what my kids would have said to me if I said, "You can't take the job." That kind of came up. And then, you know, this was a wonderful opportunity. It was another thing in my head, you know, as someone who always empowered her own daughters, why would you get in the way? I had to very quickly filter all this out. And I said to her, "This is very disappointing, Fatima, but what is important to you here?" And, you know, she said to me, "I want to respect my parents." And, you know, that led the conversation from there. And you know, it was just that learning moment that I thought, wow, whatever I thought she was going to answer, I didn't expect that answer. And then how her career went swimmingly afterwards, and she found something that was mutually good for both sides. So things vary. You know, this is part of context and culture.
Yeah. Yes, and we can't put our own kind of, well, oh, roll up the sleeves and go in there and fight for her, because that, yeah, absolutely. It's
And
is actually, yeah, what's important.
yeah, and rather than kind of also go into fixing the problem, like,
Yeah.
oh, well, let's get her, persuade her parents, or we'll get her another job or whatever. It's kind of taking that other step back from it. And what's the bigger value at stake here in this decision, you know? And the
Yeah.
numbers really was that, during audit season, the young auditors have to stay out till 2, 3 in the morning to finish audits. And in certain cultures, having an unmarried daughter out at that time would just not work. And it was a beautiful moment of learning for me and awareness. And I've had many others since.
It also brings up actually something about workplace environments, recognizing cultures, that actually expecting people to be out till 2, 3 in the morning is perhaps not, it's not an equal expectation. Some people are more likely to be able to fulfill that than others for various different reasons. It may not even be a cultural reason. There's lots of different reasons why some of these things are not possible. How can we, or do you, sorry, I'm phrasing that question really badly. Do you have any experience of organizations that are kind of getting it right? Or what are the factors involved with getting cross-cultural working right, perhaps at a systems-wide level, do you think? And I realise, Linda, I've dropped you right in it there, because that wasn't something that we talked about before we went live.
Oh, I think an organization that I track, and I haven't worked for them, but maybe I'll put it out there, the law of attraction, Patagonia,
Oh, yeah.
with Patagonia and their wonderful adventure sports brand.
Yeah.
But I had the pleasure of hearing their HR chief talk at a conference, and I've been tracking them on the internet ever since, and they have this saying, what can we put back into our people rather than what can we get out of them, which I love. But they seem to have this way of, it's not just around cultural diversity, but age, people with passion, allowing people be very strong activists for various political, if you like, issues, and giving them time at work, off from work, to pursue that passion. And, there's just something I would say about how they set themselves up. And interestingly, they introduced a 9-day fortnight. And so that meant that people had regular 3-day weekends, which is a godsend when you have other responsibilities outside of work. It allows that catch up. But what fascinated me was when they did a survey afterwards to say, well, how's this working? They didn't look at profitability. They didn't just look at output and productivity. They actually looked at, is this improving our employees' relationships? Is this improving their diet, their wellness, their eating habits, because they've this extra time? So a very holistic view.
I love that. That, actually this is about the person in front of us. As coaches, we should be looking at the person, not the problem that they're facing. And actually, person includes their culture and the way that they live and their well-being and all of that. I am actually going to go back to my list of questions now, because I took us a bit off track.
You could go in lots of different directions from here.
We were thinking about, what do we need to pay attention to as coaches? And yeah, I think there's something in this about our own cultural standards as well. But what do we need to pay attention to when we're coaching?
First of all, I think authenticity is huge, to be who you are, know who you are. And some of I do a good bit of mentor coaching, and some of my mentees, feel a bit intimidated about this cross-cultural opening that is now there for us, and they're a bit afraid they'll get things wrong. And my view is we can't know every culture, the nuance of every culture. We can be open to it and we can be interested in it, but it's not like we're encyclopedias. So there may be times you'll say the wrong thing or put your foot in it. If it's a genuine mistake, it will not cause offense. So my view is just being who you are, not trying to force. Sometimes, again, political correctness, there is a need for it. We do need to have clean language, for instance. There's a lot of good implied in political correctness policies in the workplace. But often, you know, what they say is, going back to in-group, out-group, that the political correctness creates such a fear in people of getting things wrong. They're afraid to mix with their out-group. And so they cling to their in-group where they know we're all on the same page. So I think what we have to pay attention to is just being ourselves, knowing that we can't know everything. Even at the start of a coaching engagement, recognize that your client is different. Don't pretend that they're not different to you. And sort of say, tell me all about it. What would you expect from coaching?
Yes.
What's comfortable for you to say? What's comfortable for us to meet? What kind of places are comfortable? Maybe don't make too many assumptions, but don't expect that you have to know. People will tell you. People will tell you. And humor is great, actually. Just humor is marvelous. And the one thing I probably have learned, and I'm sure you have too, Mariana, the human condition trumps color of the skin, nationality, age. It really does, because when you get into deep coaching with clients, the similarity, say in the last year of the pandemic, the issues of resilience, of stress, of fear, of concern, they are going cross cultures. So the human condition is what we understand and what we work with.
I love that thing that you were talking to about just it's the coach quality, isn't it? It's like asking questions, it's having curiosity, it's and kind of naming it, being direct and just, you know, wondering and, saying it. I'm reminded of an instance where I worked in a communications role we were doing some campaigning with the Haredi community in London, so very Orthodox Jewish community, and there was a very clear expectation within that community about dress codes and roles, gender roles, and the realization that, yes, I want to work with this community. I've got an important message to share with the community and to talk to them, but actually I couldn't expect my team, because of the legislation within the UK, I couldn't require my team to wear a certain dress code. So, you know, it came down to a respect, actually. I think you were talking about that as well. I can imagine working and living in the Middle East at the moment, when there is a stereotype about perceptions in the Middle East about women's roles, for example, and dress and all of that. And I'm sure that you're balancing the needs with a level of respect and authenticity with how you need to
be. Right. You know, for instance, some people think, maybe we should wear the shayla and the abaya, which would be the typical dress of the Gulf woman. But as expats, we're not required to at all. And I think as long as you are within the bounds of normal business etiquette dress, you know, normal modest dress, you're perfectly fine. And you know, the other, if you like, they recognize that we are different. They make allowances. And I think it's more authentic to have your own style within certain norms. And that's certainly what I do. But I think there is a thing around stereotyping too that we need to be aware of when it comes to cross-culture. And again, stereotyping is very natural. We do it all the time. It's kind of a short.
It's the them and us thing, isn't it? It's the in-group, out-group again.
Yeah. Even, you know, if I meet, you know, I'm introduced to somebody's daughter, 17-year-old, immediately I have a stereotype that allows me make small talk with this girl. The kind of band she's interested, the clothes she's interested, the TV programs. And maybe she's not interested in those at all, but the kind of Stereotype is a positive to a degree, as long as it doesn't put blinkers on us. And interestingly, last year actually, I was coaching 3 Emirati young women, all professionals. And again, one might say, oh, Emirati women, they're going to have certain issues and they're going to see the world in a certain way. These were 3 sisters. And let me tell you, it was an eye-opener. Each one of them was such a beautiful individual. Each one of them had different concerns, different ways of looking at it. Yes, there was a kind of cultural holder there, but in the loosest of sense. And again, it just taught me, with the same upbringing, the same education, that it is the human and the human condition, and their needs and wants actually were quite different.
Yeah. I love this. No, but it is, there is more that unites us than divides us. I think that's what it comes down to, isn't it? And I think it's tapping into that and understanding that without making assumptions, though.
That's right. And I think that, and maybe we should have made this distinction earlier, Mariana, there are people who call themselves cross-cultural coaches or cross-cultural trainers, and they have a niche, and what they specialize in is sort of helping senior executives learn the business etiquette, how to behave at meetings, how to do business deals, etc. So in a sense, we're not really getting into that in this conversation. We're talking about all of us as coaches with a potential global marketplace and a more diverse marketplace in our home countries, that we all think cross-culturally and think about that core competency that's so been beautifully put about culture and context. So it's not just culture either, because again, it might be different if I share, I'm a woman, I'm Irish, I'm middle-aged, but my context is I'm living an expat life. You know what I mean? And I'm working and my children are grown. So there's all differences that the context will bring to us as a client, as a potential client.
I'm looking at our list of things that we were going to think about today, and there's something, you've tapped into the whole idea of unconscious bias. I saw a big article, I will share it in the group, about the training on unconscious bias actually being not great. I'm just wondering about unconscious bias and how it feels like the great reckoner, that we have to do the work ourselves. We have to look at ourselves. Sorry, I don't quite know where I'm going with that thought, but I think it does come into this as well. It's pay attention to our own stuff as well as everyone else's.
It is. And I'm lucky that I work not just here in the Middle East, which is very multicultural, and that exposes me, but also with my work at ICF on various boards, and their global representatives. And I have some great colleagues, and they will help us. when we might, maybe a white middle-aged woman I have my own unconscious biases. And I just love that the relationship I have, and we all have together as fellow directors, that we can kind of lift that up and say, now, what are you actually saying here? What is your belief there? That we actually all need someone that we can trust to call us. Because the difficulty is there's no malice in it, but it is unconscious. And it's how it lands with the other person and how it limits the relationship, between the two sides. And I think diversity and inclusion is going to be the hottest topic in the workplace, I think, in the next 3 years. I think we have policies in place in most companies. So there is that, when we looked at that framework, we probably got the awareness of it and the positive attitude towards it. But I don't think we've drilled into the knowledge and the skills that we've really all been able to confront our unconscious bias and you know, how limiting they are for us as a society, you know. And the pandemic is showing us that something like the pandemic doesn't see the color of anyone's skin or the color of their passport at all.
No, absolutely. Linda, is there anything else that we need to be thinking about today? I know this is a kind of conversation that could go on for a long time.
I had a few notes myself earlier. I'm just thinking we've kind of
talking about the cultural competencies as well, just generally.
I think it's really about asking questions, catching your assumptions, listening, staying in non-judgment.
Embodying our coaching mindset.
In a way, I think coaches can be cheerleaders for this.
Yeah.
All our basic training is setting us up for this, you know, and we probably, the work we do in organizations, especially, you know, the team coaching we're doing, the executive and leadership coaching we're doing in organizations can really begin to help shape agendas. And something I'm doing a lot more of recently now is training managers and leaders in workplaces to adopt basic coaching skills. So they're not going to ever be coaches, but it's about changing the hierarchies and changing the team dynamics in terms of how these managers are learning to listen and ask questions. Now, that might sound very, very basic, but it's surprising that many managers have forgotten how to do that.
There's a question that I ask quite a lot of managers, which is, and what did you say? And did you tell them? You know, when they were saying, this and that happened, and this happened, and that happened. And actually, they've never actually, to a large extent, had the conversation or told the person. They've just brought it all to coaching. And I think there is something about that that kind of ties a lot of this together with our bias, our understanding of other cultures, our perceptions and stereotypes and everything, which is just to talk, to have the conversation.
And it's very interesting here, you know, like I remember at the end of my first semester teaching in the business school, and I was eagerly awaiting my evaluations. And when they came out, there was a lot of, we love, they all call you professor. We love Professor Linda because she's very kind and very nice. Now, my instinctive reaction to that was nice and kind. I was used to being evaluated on the basis of my knowledge or my wisdom or my content. And yet, when I discussed this with a client, with a colleague who'd been in the region longer than me, they said, that is the highest compliment. So it's so interesting, the values that we have and how it even guides what we hear, what we pay attention to. Like I was about to filter out nice and kind as meaningless, when really those students were saying something beautiful to me. And I wasn't able to hear it. And I have learned now to be open to that.
That unpacking of language is really important, I think, culturally. You will probably relate to this one, Linda. When I moved to Ireland with a toddler and went to a lot of kind of toddler groups, there was this, they're being very bold. And for me, as an English woman, being bold is a good thing. Bold means you're brave and courageous, and it's a quality that we want. And in Ireland, bold is naughty. It's pushing it's pushing authority and being, you know, challenging in a negative sense. So I think even with seemingly similar cultures as England and Ireland, you know, there's a nuance of language which is an interesting, gives a whole rich difference in meaning.
Yes, and even I've noticed too with clients of different ethnicities, how they might express a challenge. Some might want to be more dramatic, others might want to be very understated. And you're not really listening, that very understated thing could just go past you in a blink of an eye. You know, even the tone of voice varies a lot. The kind of body language tends to vary. And it is amazing, but how maybe we kind of, if we can go with the intuition, we don't have to overthink it, but just go with the intuition, know we're in a good place, we're coming from respect, and we're curious.
And don't bring our old cultural expectations onto our client. So if they're not using eye contact or whatever, don't make an assumption based on where you were at about your clients.
Absolutely.
Linda, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm just wondering if there's anything else that we need to think about to wrap things up.
Just carry on coaching, everybody. and the wide world is out there, and let's, as a group of coaches, make that impact together, impact for the better.
Thank you so much. Linda, I'm going to stop the recording now, and I may accidentally shove you out of the meeting. Would you just come back in again and say goodbye to me?
Okay.
Bye to everybody else.